Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. I am here right now live. This is the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that like button to let me know you in the building. Also hit the subscribe button if you want to be consistently in the hottest conversations, the most critical analysis, the most critical community in the world is right here. And it's not because of me, it's because of y'all. Y'all make all of this happen. So a couple of days ago, the U.S. Congress, specifically the House of Representatives, held a special hearing. This is a Republican-led hearing that dealt with anti-Semitism on campus. It was a hearing specifically entitled Holding Campus Leaders Accountable and Confronting Anti-Semitism. Now, this sounds like an important issue. And of course, the House Education and Work Committee does important work on the question and on the issue of anti-Semitism. And so I was very eager, very excited even to hear what they were going to say, because at all moments we got to deal with the question of anti-Semitism on college campuses, as we do other issues on college campuses: transphobia, homophobia, Islamophobia, white supremacy more broadly. We got to deal with all this stuff. And so why not have this conversation? Cool. The issue is, this was not really about fighting anti-Semitism. This was an opportunity for grandstanding. This was an opportunity for Republican members of the House of Representatives to come around and badger the invited guests, the invited speakers, the invited campus leaders. They say they're going to confront campus leaders. Now, confronting people is important. You got to hold people in power accountable. But what they really did was find three university presidents: president of MIT, president of University of Pennsylvania, and the president of Harvard University, and badger them with questions that are deliberately misleading. The goal of this was to prove that campuses are anti-Semitic. And the evidence of the campuses being anti-Semitic were effectively showing that the campuses were not doing enough to punish Palestinian activism, to punish Palestinian students, to punish Palestinian allies. And so all the evidence they marshaled, all the questions they asked, were skewed in such a way that it would reinforce that idea. And it was all anchored under the belief and under the idea that, again, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. So they're basically saying anybody on campus who's anti-Zionist is effectively anti-Semitic, that any resistance to the Israeli government or the Israeli state is in and of itself an act of anti-Semitism. And so if you begin from that place, then it's really easy to prove that campuses are anti-Semitic. Let me say this one more time, though. There is pervasive anti-Semitism on college campuses. There is pervasive anti-Semitism in the workforce. There is pervasive anti-Semitism around the country. There is pervasive anti-Semitism around the globe, and it is growing. And I don't doubt, based on what we've heard and based on what we've seen, that some of that anti-Semitism has grown post-October 7th, because it certainly was pervasive pre-October 7th. Ain't no doubt about any of that. The problem is, that ain't what they were talking about in this hearing. So one of the things that they grilled these people on, and I'll start with President McGill. President McGill is the president of the University of Pennsylvania. You may be shocked to know, certainly some of these Republicans will be shocked to know, that I am an alum of the University of Pennsylvania. I got my PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. I'm not saying that to brag, I'm saying that for context. And so when Liz McGill, the president of this festival, the president of this university, was grilled, one of the things they asked her about was the Palestinian Writers Festival that took place in September at the University of Pennsylvania. They said that this was evidence of anti-Semitism on campus because they invited anti-Semitic speakers. Who were the anti-Semitic speakers that they invited? They said Roger Waters was invited. They said Susan Abu Hawa was invited. Susan Abu Hawa is a Palestinian activist. She is a brilliant writer. She wrote the book Mornings in Jenin, which you all should read. If you love fiction, you should read it. If you don't love fiction, you should read it anyway. It might convert you. And she also she also organized this festival. Who else did they say was there? Marc Lamont Hill. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, they said that we were the anti-Semites who were being invited to campus and that we were threatening the safety of the Jewish students. I gotta say, you know, it never stops being painful. It never stops being hurtful to hear that. There's nothing that troubles me more than being accused of something so disgusting. Their evidence that I was a threat to the students on campus was the fact that I once said, "Free Palestine from the river to the sea." Now, there's been a whole controversy. I left CNN over this. There's been all this stuff, and yet they're still trafficking this slogan to say that I'm somehow unsafe for students on campus because I made this claim. They didn't let Roger Waters on the campus. You know, these universities talk about free speech. They love free speech, but they don't want dissenting opinions. Now, if someone is really a threat, and there are people who are anti-Semitic, anti-Semites shouldn't be allowed on campus if it's unsafe. Now, we have to think about free speech as well. You know, everybody who I agree with and everybody who I disagree with, you know, we have to make room for both of those camps. But there's a difference between disagreement and actual unsafety. And the problem with this congressional hearing is that they mix those two things. And let's be clear, they're beating up on the president of University of Pennsylvania for allowing this writers' festival to exist. They didn't want us there either. That's the irony of it. Liz McGill, the president of Penn, didn't want us there. She wrote a response to the protesters, including members of Congress, who said that we shouldn't be there. And she basically said, yeah, they're anti-Semites, but, you know, what are you going to do? Free speech. I was very disappointed with her response. I was very disappointed with the letter that she signed along with the provost and one other person, basically conceding that we were monsters, but that you have to be able to allow monsters on campus. It was deeply hurtful, I'll be honest with you. But more importantly, it was so fundamentally dishonest. And yet, despite the fact that the university said, hey, free speech, we denounce anti-Semitism, they're still getting beat up in this congressional hearing. The president of MIT got a similar beat down, but I think the most profound and aggressive grilling happened to Dr. Gay, the president of Harvard University. Dr. Claudine Gay is the president of Harvard University. She was grilled on several issues, and it was disgusting to watch. Most of the grilling happened from Elise Stefanik, who is a right-wing MAGA Republican, self-described, who took it upon herself to grandstand. That's why all the hearings you see, all the clips you see from the hearing, all the evidence you see from this session is usually Stefanik beating up on people, asking questions, but asking them in a way that makes it seem as if these people, these educational leaders, are being wildly irresponsible, dishonest, evasive, when in fact they're giving very precise and important answers, even when I disagree with them. And that's why I say they made an epic fail. The university presidents made an epic fail, but the Republicans who are grilling them are being so disingenuous that it's really a race for who came off worse, who failed worse in this thing. So Stefanik grills the president of Harvard University first for not allowing the Israeli flag to fly at Harvard. Think about that for a second. What do you think about that for a second? They grilled her and criticized her implicitly because she did not allow the Israeli flag to fly. I want to play the audio for you because I don't want y'all to think I'm making this up. I'm going to pull the audio up. I want y'all to hear this.
Yes. And Dr. Gay, did anyone contact you about flying the Israeli flag over Harvard Yard? Yes. And the decision was made not to allow the flag to be flown over Harvard Yard?
It's been standard protocol at the university for years to only fly the American flag unless we have a visiting dignitary.
So the decision was made to allow the Ukraine flag to be flown over Harvard Yard?
That was a decision that was made by my predecessor as an exception to a long-standing rule.
So it was an exception. So you made an exception for the Ukrainian flag, but not the university made an exception for the Ukrainian flag, but not the Israeli flag.
That was a choice made by my predecessor.
So let's start there. Why is the university being criticized for not flying the Israeli flag? Why should the Israeli flag or the French flag or the German flag or the Greek flag or the Uzbekistan, Uzbeki flag, I think is right, or is it Uzbekistani flag, not permitted on Harvard Yard? We can ask that question for all those countries. But we didn't. You know, look, Harvard has a policy of not flying any other country's flag. Most universities do that. I don't know any university in the world that flies the flag of other countries unless a dignitary from that country's coming. Yeah, if the president of Russia comes, yeah, you fly the Russian flag. If the prime minister or president of Israel were to arrive, yeah, you fly the flag. But you don't just randomly fly the flag, or you don't fly the flag when a tragedy occurs in that nation. That's not Harvard's policy. Now, you can disagree with the policy, but again, they're framing it through the lens of anti-Semitism. And the first thing they do is say to Claudine Gay, well, you did this one and didn't do that one. She pointed out, I wasn't president then. You can't hold me accountable for that one. And she said, yeah, but you guys did the Ukraine. Okay, the university did the Ukraine. She goes, yeah, as an exception to a long-standing rule. You made an exception for Ukraine, but not for Israel. There was a war in Ukraine, and many people responded with extraordinary sympathy for Ukraine, as they should have. And they changed their avatars, and they flew flags, and they wore T-shirts. And yes, in that moment, the previous Harvard president did that. Claudine Gay is saying, look, I didn't do that. I follow the rule. I suspect implicit in that is if I had been president when the Ukraine thing happened, I wouldn't have done that either. But instead, they're trying to make her look anti-Semitic because she won't fly the Israeli flag at an American university. This is the reach. This is the performance, right? They're trying to make a case for something that's not, it's not there. At least not in that way. Again, plenty of anti-Semitism on campuses, plenty of anti-Semitism to be addressed. But the only anti-Semitism they're looking for is not real anti-Semitism. They're looking for criticisms of the Israeli government, and they're mislabeling that as anti-Semitism. This is why it's so frustrating. So then they kept pushing the president, Claudine Gay. And so they then grill her and they ask her about calls for genocide on campus. Again, if you're calling for genocide on college campus, you should absolutely be addressed, disciplined, managed, because that creates an unhealthy climate. I'm going to say that again. If somebody is calling for genocide on a college campus, they should be handled. They should be disciplined. They should be addressed. That is unacceptable. I'm going to play you a clip from some conversation that's happening between, again, Elise Stefanik and some of these university presidents on these issues. Listen to this.
Calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct?
Now, this is,
yes or no?
Now, again, this is to Liz McGill. I'm going back a second. This is to Elizabeth McGill, who was the president of University of Penn, and then it jumps to the other president. Listen to this again.
Side of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If the
Yes
speech
or no?
becomes, if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment. Yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide?
Now, we'll listen. We'll keep listening.
Just calling for the genocide.
This is to the president of Harvard now.
Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment, yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric.
It's anti-Semitic rhetoric.
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
So the answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
Wow. And you should resign. So let's talk about this. First, I actually agree that if you call for genocide of Jews walking through campus, if you're walking through campus calling for the genocide of Jews, that is harassment, bullying. That is actionable conduct. I wish the university presidents would have just said that and stipulated that. But here's where both sides are messing up. And this is so wildly frustrating. First, it is a dishonest question, because if one were to watch this hearing with no context, they would think that college campuses are filled with people actually calling for genocide. What she's referring to, and she concedes this at some point in the hearing, is she's talking about people saying river to the sea. She's talking about people saying there is only one solution, intifada revolution. That these are the chants that pro-Palestinian students are saying throughout the campus. And so she's saying that, well, if you say river to the sea, that is a call for genocide. If you say intifada, if you say the word intifada, you're calling to destroy Jews around the world. And because of that, this is a clear-cut call to genocide. And so to accept her point about genocide, you have to accept her definition of genocide. And the problem is Palestinian students or pro-Palestinian activists who are walking through campus or chanting through campus about river to the sea, Palestine will be free, or intifada revolution, they're not calling for the destruction of, they've been explicit in saying we're not calling for harm to Jews. We're not calling for the destruction of Jews. We are calling for a social reform. We are calling for a radical reform. We are calling for a radical change in the world. We're calling for justice in Palestine. And so because the Zionist position is, well, if Israel stops being an ethno state, then we could be destroyed. Then it's saying that asking for a one-state solution is also considered what? An act of genocide or call for genocide. And so the net for genocide gets really, really wide. And then they're saying, so, and the problem with that is, as a university president, you can't say students can't come on campus and call for a one-state solution. As a university president, you can't say my students can't chant to end Zionism. As a university president, you can't say that my students can't say intifada. Intifada doesn't necessarily mean that. Intifada is about resistance. And guess what? According to international law, an occupied people has a right to resist occupation. It's not an unlimited right. You can't kill civilians. You can't take hostages. There's all kinds of stuff you can't do. But an intifada in and of itself is not inherently illegal, immoral, or anything else. Context matters. And the university presidents said exactly that. They said context matters. They didn't allow Elise Stefanik to box them into a corner where they say, yes, whenever somebody calls for genocide, they get kicked off of campus, because then they find every student that says, I support a one-state solution, and then they could kick them off of campus. So they said it depends on context. It has to be actionable. The problem is, Elise Stefanik was playing a political game, and these people were playing an intellectual game. And so they were just serving up home runs. They were like throwing underhanded to her. It was like a Mets pitching staff. They were saying, look, if it becomes action, something about it. So now she goes, so you have to do a genocide? No, that's not what they were saying. But it was a great move, Elise Stefanik. It was a great political move. It was a great political jujitsu you did there, because you made them look bad. You talked and walked and ran circles around those university presidents, because the news cameras, the news coverage, it showed you declaring a very decisive victory by making them look like they refused to be honest about anti-Semitism. But what the university presidents were doing was being precise and honest and also careful, because they don't want to box themselves into a corner. But where they failed was they were dishonest. That's all they had to say was, look, I'm not accepting your definition of genocide. But they don't want to do that, because if you do that, then they're going to say, well, what's your definition of genocide? And then they would then have to articulate a position that would run counter to the dominant political narrative that they're trying to echo. So they're in a tough spot, right? If the president of Harvard says, well, yeah, of course, calling for genocide is a problem. I just don't think all these calls are actually genocide. If she said that, she would look consistent and it would be clear why she's not answering yes or no to a question that's clearly not a yes or no question. But then she'd have to catch hell for that. And that's a different kind of hell. So instead, she is being cagey. At what point they asked the president of Harvard, do you support Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state? Again, complicated question. But if you just say yes, maybe you're not being true to your intellectual position. A lot of people believe that. And if you believe it, you should say it. But if you say no, nobody lets you say another word in that congressional hearing, because all you're going to be talking about is why you don't believe Israel should exist as a Jewish state. She was cagey about it. Professor or Dr. President Gay said, I support Israel's right to exist as a state. I'm gonna say it again. They said, do you support Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state? And she said, I support Israel's right to exist as a state. Now, she may have been saying, look, I don't want to take a position on the political nature of it. I support all states' right to exist, i.e. the respect of territorial integrity. I'm not getting into the question of Jewish state or not, because that's outside of my expertise. That could have been what she meant. But again, you don't want to punt on that. You can't say that either, because then people will say, why don't you? Why is this a question for you? And you don't want that to be the headline. So she tried to slip it in and say, look, I support Israel's right to exist as a state. That's an honest answer. And it's the same answer I would give. I support every nation's right to have their territorial integrity respected. But the United States doesn't have a right to exist. Mexico doesn't have a right to exist. Saudi Arabia doesn't have a right to exist. Cuba doesn't have a right to exist. No, countries don't have rights to exist. People do. But you can't say that in this hearing. So what do? They hit her on that too. So you walk out of this hearing with Elise Stefanik as a champion for our Jewish brothers and sisters, and as a tough, unflappable warrior in the fight to end anti-Semitism on college campuses. Except here's the problem. One, they're misrepresenting and misdiagnosing the problem because they're defining anti-Semitism as anti-Zionism. And two, they're ignoring the real people who are anti-Semitic, which oftentimes are those right-wing MAGA hat-wearing evangelicals who actually come on campus and spout things like replacement theory. And here's the part that is going to blow your mind if you don't already know. Elise Stefanik, House Republican Conference Chair, the one who's badgering these university presidents, the one who is shedding tears almost, and her voice is quaking, you can hear it. She is the very person who has platformed anti-Semitic remarks. She is the very person who has created safe environments for anti-Semitic theories. She has a House leadership role, and she has used it consistently to conflate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. She's consistently used it to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. But while she's doing that, she has said nothing about Donald Trump's, and she's a Donald Trump person. She calls herself an ultra MAGA warrior. And I'm talking about extreme right-wing stuff. She calls Democrats pedo grifters. which means she's supporting QAnon, the real crazy, wild stuff. She ain't saying nothing about that. She hasn't criticized Thomas Massey, who's her colleague in Congress, one time. Congress Massey is the one saying that Jewish people are torn or contradicting their loyalty between Israel and the United States. Dual loyalty is a classic anti-Semitic trope. He's articulating something anti-Semitic, and she's saying nothing about it. She herself has talked about great replacement theory. According to Haaretz, the paper of record in Israel, she has trafficked in the great replacement theory, which alleges immigration encouraged by Jews is meant to dilute the white population. That is a white nationalist narrative. And guess what? That logic of the great replacement theory was used by the people in Charlottesville who carried those tiki torches and said the Jews will not replace us. And it was believed and embraced by the person who killed and caused all that destruction at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So the very person shedding crocodile tears in Congress and badgering university presidents about anti-Semitism is actually complicit in multiple ways with actual anti-Semitism in the world. Not criticisms of Israel, not criticisms of Netanyahu, not criticisms of the Israeli occupation, not criticisms of the siege in Gaza, not criticisms of apartheid inside the region. None of that. She got smoke for those people. But the real anti-Semitism that leads to synagogues getting destroyed, that leads to disgusting theories like great replacement theory, the thing that actually subjects our Jewish brothers and sisters to harm, she ain't said a word about it. She said in 2021 that radical Democrats are planning a permanent election insurrection. I'm going to quote her. She said, and I quote, "Their plan to grant amnesty to 11 million illegal immigrants will overthrow our current electorate and create a permanent liberal majority in Washington." That theory ties directly to great replacement theory. Now, in fairness, she says she wasn't engaging in Nazist thought and white supremacist thought. I want to be honest and fair and say she rejected that characterization after it was put out there. But she has consistently trafficked in these tropes and these lies. I want to be clear, and I know y'all think I say this because I'm scared or because I don't know why I'm being strategic. It's not that. I really mean this. Anti-Semitism is real. Anti-Semitism is pervasive. Anti-Semitism is growing. And we all have a duty to fight anti-Semitism. We all have a duty to challenge anti-Semitism. I will say that until I'm blue in the face. The way to do it is not to go into Congress and beat up on university presidents for not beating up on Palestinian students and pro-Palestinian activists. That ain't the way. The way to do it is to actually figure out what we can do to make our Jewish students and our Jewish community more broadly feel safer. What we can do to actually address the theories and the ideas and the conditions and the politics and the policies that lead to the unsafety of Jewish people around the world. Let's address the actual stuff that's wrong. But let's not continue to advance this ridiculous idea that anybody who criticizes Israel is an anti-Semite, that any critique of the Israeli state and its formation is a rejection of Jewish people, or that the call for a peaceful democratic outcome in the region that alienates no one is somehow a call for violence or genocide. We got to have an honest conversation, and that did not happen in Congress. But here's the thing. I don't expect Elise Stefanik to be honest. I don't expect her to be an honest broker. She's there to do a job, and that is to grandstand. Hers work because people all around the country, all around the world are talking about her and looking at her on this TV screen. But I did expect more from the university presidents to either be more careful with their words or more honest with their words, to actually say it with their chest so that they don't get boxed into these ridiculous corners. But instead, they tried to split the difference. And instead of looking thoughtful and nuanced, they still get labeled anti-Semitic, and they've done nothing to honor the rights, freedoms, or privileges of the Palestinian and pro-Palestinian base. So now everybody's mad at them. That ain't a good job. Now, at least Stefanik says they should all be fired. And her tone with Claudine Gay, by the way, sounded disgusting to me. I ain't gonna call it racist, but there was some racism underneath. I felt some hard ERs tacitly in her words, but I could be wrong. Let's say she's just an ass to everybody. Let's just say she's a jerk to everybody. Fine. Saying that these university presidents should be fired for this is ridiculous. Now, Penn showed me no love. Penn gave me no respect as an alum, as a local figure, as a speaker, as a colleague. They threw me under the bus completely. But Liz McGill still shouldn't be fired. Claudine Gay still shouldn't be fired. None of them should be fired because they didn't do anything wrong. Not based on this hearing. And that's what matters. All right, family, look. I want y'all to hit that like button right now if you're feeling what I'm saying. I want y'all to hit the subscribe button. I say it every time, but I mean it. Y'all hit the red subscribe button. Become a subscriber to this channel. It allows you to hear the work we do, see the work we do, and be updated on the work that we do. And I'm asking you, if you could, hit the join button, even if it's for the bronze level. That allows us to build this channel up, build this station up, create a space for radical education, critical thought, and media counter narratives. We're not here to do TV. We're here to build minds. And that happens when you join the channel, when you subscribe to the channel. So look, family, I love y'all. I'll see y'all later. I got a debate with a Zionist that I will be airing tonight. Look out for it on the channel. And while you're here, watch some other videos and see if you like anything. Leave your comment, leave your thought. Again, one more time, hit that subscribe button. See y'all later. Peace.